I never thought I'd see something like this. Not in all my years. There I was, standing at the window, the moonlight dancing on the water as I sipped my tea, when I saw Rebecca. She was walking toward the dock, her movements deliberate. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then, I saw her lift something, a suitcase, heavy and worn, and without a moment's hesitation, she tossed it into the lake. The ripples spread slowly, but the impact hit me hard. I couldn't move. The weight of that moment sank in as deep as the suitcase head into the water. What on earth could she be hiding? Why would she do this? Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. I'm Margaret McAllister, but you can call me Maggie. I'm 72 years old, and I've lived in this house by the lake longer than I can remember. Raised 3 children here, John, my oldest, Mary who's out west now, and Jason, my youngest. My life's been full of its fair share of heartaches, but there's always been one thing I could count on, the lake. It's seen me through the storms of my life, whether it was the loss of a loved one or just the slow passage of time. It was the one thing that never changed. Until that night, that suitcase. It wasn't just some old bag. I knew it wasn't. See, I've always been the keeper of memories in this family. I hold on to the things that matter, photos, keepsakes, letters, family treasures passed down through generations. Some of those old photos were the only things I had left of loved ones long gone. I'd spent years keeping those memories safe, reminding my children of who we were and where we came from. But now, Rebecca had thrown something into that lake that I couldn't even begin to understand. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced. I had to know what was in that suitcase. It couldn't just be clothes or random junk. It wasn't like her. She's always been so careful, so controlled. I walked to the dock the next morning, heart pounding, hoping to find something, anything that might give me an answer. The lake was calm, eerily still, and the suitcase was nowhere to be seen. But I knew. I knew what I saw. And something deep in my gut told me this wasn't just some mindless act. Rebecca was hiding something. Something that could tear our family apart, and as I stood there, staring out at the water, I realized I wasn't just looking for a suitcase. I was looking for the truth. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, this wasn't just about the suitcase. It was about everything that had been buried for years. Things my family had kept hidden, things they thought I would never find out. And now, somehow, Rebecca had pulled the thread that was going to unravel it all. I spent the entire day staring at the water, wondering what Rebecca could have been hiding in that suitcase. I thought about the generations that had passed through this house, the hands that built it, the voices that echoed through these walls. My father, my mother, my children. This house was more than just bricks and wood, it was history. My history. Our family's history. And suddenly, that history felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I remember one particular photo. It was taken in 1965, the year my husband, Frank, and I had our first child, John. I was sitting on the porch swing, holding him in my arms, his tiny body swaddled in a blanket. Frank was beside me, looking at the camera, a rare smile on his face. That picture had been the centerpiece of my life for years. It reminded me of who I was, of who we all were, together. And yet, in the blink of an eye, it felt like that memory, that moment, had been erased. I couldn't shake the feeling that Rebecca's actions had something to do with the very core of our family. Something I had overlooked for far too long. I couldn't help but think back to the day Rebecca first came into our lives. John had introduced her to the family about 5 years ago, a sweet young woman with big dreams and a heart full of promises. I remember her smile, that bright, innocent smile, and how she seemed to fit right in. At first, she was perfect for John, calm, collected, the kind of woman who didn't ruffle any feathers. But as the months went by, something started to change. She started to pull away from the family. Quiet dinners turned into distant conversations. Holidays were spent with her family instead of ours. And then, there were the late nights when John would come home, eyes tired, face stressed, but never a word about what was really going on. The night I saw Rebecca throw that suitcase into the lake, I knew something had snapped. She wasn't the same woman I had welcomed into this family. She was hiding something, and whatever it wasn't just about her. It was about all of us. My family. My history. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something important. My mind kept circling back to those photos, generational photos, memories I had kept safe for decades. What if they weren't just photographs? What if there was something in them, some hidden clue, that explained why Rebecca was acting the way she was? Had I overlooked something crucial? And if so, what had I missed? The more I thought about it, the more it all seemed to connect: the suitcase, the photos, Rebecca's strange behavior. I knew I had to act fast. If I didn't get to the bottom of this soon, everything I had worked for, everything I had built, could be gone in the blink of an eye. But how far was I willing to go to protect my family's legacy? I made up my mind. I was going to search through every inch of this house. Every drawer. Every closet. Every box. Whatever Rebecca was hiding, I was going to find it. But I knew I had to be careful. Rebecca was smart, too smart for her own good. She wouldn't just let me find the truth easily. But then again, I wasn't going to let her get away with this either. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the lake, I knew this was just the beginning. The deeper I went, the more I realized, I wasn't just searching for a suitcase. I was searching for the truth, and I wasn't going to stop until I found it. I spent the night awake, my thoughts racing. There were so many things I still didn't understand. Why would Rebecca throw those photos into the lake? Why would she risk everything to destroy something that had been passed down through 3 generations of our family? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about the photos. It was about something far deeper, something from the past that had never truly been resolved. You see, family isn't just about love, it's also about the things we don't talk about. The secrets that linger beneath the surface. And in my family, those secrets have a way of resurfacing when you least expect them. I couldn't help but think back to my brother-in-law, Mark. He wasn't part of our family for long, just a few years. Really, but his time here was enough to change everything. Mark was a smooth talker, always the life of the party. He had a way of charming people, making them believe he was someone he wasn't. He charmed my sister, Jean, into marrying him when they were both so young. But from the moment he walked into this house, I knew something wasn't right. Jean was blinded by love, but I saw the signs. There was always something off about Mark, something dark that didn't quite fit with the rest of us. Mark and Jean's marriage didn't last long. One evening, after too many drinks, Mark let something slip that I wasn't supposed to hear. It was a story about money, lies, and betrayal. He had taken something that didn't belong to him, something that should have been passed down in our family. I never confronted him about it, never let on that I knew, but I saw the toll it took on Jean. She was devastated when their marriage ended, and I spent years helping her pick up the pieces. But the damage was done. Mark had taken something irreplaceable, the trust of the family. And once that's gone, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. But now, looking back, I wonder, did Rebecca know about this? Did she learn about Mark's betrayal before she ever married John? If she did, it would explain a lot. Perhaps she was carrying that weight with her, a burden she couldn't bear. I tried to piece it all together, but the more I dug, the more tangled it became. It wasn't just about money or the photos anymore. It was about a legacy of secrets that had been buried for decades. I went through the old family albums that night, sifting through pages of black and white photos and faded memories. The photographs were supposed to remind us of who we were, but now, they felt like a curse. Each one was a reminder of the betrayal Mark had caused, and the things I had never been able to fix. I kept coming back to that one picture, Frank, Jean, and me, all standing on the porch, laughing. That was before everything fell apart, before Mark came into our lives. The thing about family is that you don't always see the cracks until it's too late. We all have our demons, our secrets, our regrets. And sometimes, those things come back to haunt us when we least expect it. As I sat there, the weight of the past bearing down on me, I realized something. Rebecca wasn't just acting out of malice. She was acting out of fear. Fear of a legacy she didn't understand, fear of a family she felt she could never truly be part of. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew that fear couldn't be the reason for what she'd done. This wasn't just fear, it was revenge. And I had to find out why. I couldn't stop now. I had to get to the bottom of it, no matter what it took. If Rebecca was hiding something this deep, then it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. And when it did, I wasn't sure any of us would ever be the same. The next morning, I woke up with the sharp clarity of someone who has seen too much and can no longer ignore what's right in front of them. The images of Rebecca tossing that suitcase into the lake kept playing in my mind. I could still hear the soft splash as it hit the water, and the ripples, each one growing wider, felt like an omen. That suitcase wasn't just discarded, something in it was precious, irreplaceable. And I needed to know what it was. I didn't have time to waste. I put on my old boots, the ones with the cracked soles from years of walking the woods around here. I grabbed a flashlight, tucked it into my coat pocket, and headed straight for the dock. As I walked, the cool morning air bit at my skin, but it didn't stop me. It felt like the lake was waiting for me, holding its breath. When I reached the water's edge, I stood still for a moment. The lake was calm, almost eerily so, and I felt a deep sense of unease. The suitcase had sunk, that much was clear. But how far had it gone? The thought of it being lost forever gnawed at me, but I had to try. My family's history, those photos, everything we were, could be lying just beneath the surface. I couldn't let it go. Not without knowing the truth. I waded into the water, the chill seeping into my bones, but I didn't care. I needed answers. I swept my hands through the muck and silt at the lake's bottom, searching blindly. The further I went, the deeper I felt myself slipping into memories I had long buried, the bitterness of the past, the years of secrets, the betrayal. I tried to focus. The lake was quiet, too quiet. There was something unnerving about it, as though it knew what I was doing, as though it were protecting its secrets. My heart raced with every step, every touch against the soft, slimy mud beneath my feet. And then, I felt it, a hard edge, something solid, something that didn't belong in the muck. I pulled it up with all the strength I could muster, my hands shaking as I gripped the edges of the suitcase. The water dripping off it made it feel heavier than it should have been, but I didn't care. I had it. Finally. The suitcase was mine. I dragged it back to the shore, nearly collapsing as I reached the bank. My hands were trembling, but I forced them to steady as I unlatched the worn brass clasp. As the lid opened, my breath caught in my throat. The first thing I saw were the photographs, dozens of them, all neatly stacked inside. But they weren't just any photos. These were the same photos from my family's past, the ones I thought had been lost forever. The picture of Frank holding John as a baby. My wedding photo with Frank, so young, so full of hope. There were more, far more, each one telling the story of our family's history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it wasn't just photos. There were letters too. Some handwritten, some typewritten, each one sealed in faded envelopes. I flipped through them, the weight of each word pulling me deeper into the past. These weren't just family mementos, they were pieces of a story I had never been told. One letter in particular caught my eye. It was addressed to Frank, from someone I didn't recognize. The handwriting was elegant, almost too neat. The words were formal, almost cold, but there was something familiar about the tone, something that sent a shiver down my spine. The letter spoke of debts, deals, and broken promises, things Frank had never mentioned. I felt a lump form in my throat. What had he been hiding? And why had Rebecca thrown these letters into the lake? I sat there on the shore, the suitcase open beside me, the lake now a mirror of the gray sky above. A sudden realization hit me. This wasn't just about Rebecca. This was about Frank. This was about the legacy that had been built on lies. My family's past wasn't what I had thought it was. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized that Rebecca wasn't the only one with secrets. I closed the suitcase with a soft thud, the weight of the discovery sinking in. There was more to uncover, more to confront. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just about finding the past, it was about facing it. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I was about to uncover next. It's strange how quiet a house can get when you're looking for something you're not sure you want to find. The suitcase, with all its family secrets, sat in front of me, the letters and photos spilling out like a pile of forgotten memories. The things I had uncovered about Frank were unsettling, to say the least. He had always been the man who held this family together, the rock that never cracked, or so I thought. But the more I read, the more I realized that there were cracks I'd never seen. Hidden deep beneath the surface. I thought of Jean, my sister-in-law, and the way she had loved Frank like no other woman could. But after the divorce, she changed. She moved away, leaving everything behind. I never asked why. Jean had always been quiet, but there was something more to her silence, something I had never fully understood. I'd always thought it was just the weight of the divorce that had crushed her, but now, reading these letters, I wondered if there was more to it. The letter I had found addressed to Frank didn't just speak of debts or promises, it mentioned Jean, too. Something about a secret deal, a promise made in the dark. It didn't make sense at first, but as I pieced together the words, it became clear. Frank had promised Jean something that was supposed to stay hidden. But why? What could be so important that it was worth hiding from the entire family? I didn't know what to think. But there was one thing I did know: Jean had been carrying this secret for years. She never spoke about it, never even hinted at it. But now, it felt like the truth was slipping through my fingers, and I was the only one left who could piece it together. I had to speak to Jean. I needed to know what she knew. I had to hear it from her. But where was she? I hadn't heard from her in months. I hadn't even known where she had gone after the divorce, or why she never came to visit. Something in my gut told me she was hiding, too. Hiding from something or someone. As the afternoon sun began to fade, I decided to call her. The phone rang twice before she picked up, and her voice on the other end sounded as soft as I remembered, yet there was something colder about it now. "Maggie?" she asked, sounding surprised. "What's wrong?" "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice trembling. "Jean, what happened? What did Frank promise you? What was so important that it had to be kept secret?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, the hesitation hanging in the air. "I don't know what you're talking about, Maggie," she finally said, her voice distant. "I think you're mistaken." I wasn't fooled. Jean wasn't the type to lie to me, but I could tell she was hiding something. That same silence I'd grown so familiar with was back, only now, it felt like a wall. "Jean, please," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm not asking to hurt you. I just need to know the truth. Frank kept secrets from all of us. And I think you knew about it. I think you were part of it." Another long silence. Then, finally, I heard her sigh. "I didn't want to tell you, Maggie," she said softly. "But I guess you deserve to know. Frank wasn't just hiding things from you. He was hiding something from me, too. He promised me that he would take care of things that should have been settled long ago. But he failed me. And in the end, I had to walk away." "What did he fail you at?" I asked, barely able to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. "What was it?" There was a deep breath on the other end, and then Jean's voice cracked. "I can't go into it right now, Maggie. But I promise you, it's not what you think. It was never about money, it was about trust. And betrayal." I felt a chill run through me as I realized the weight of her words. This wasn't just about Frank. This was about a betrayal that stretched across the entire family, a betrayal so deep that it was poisoning everything we thought we knew about ourselves. "I need to see you," I said, my voice steadying. "Please. We need to talk in person." "I'll think about it," Jean replied, her tone cold but with a hint of vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. "But for now, Maggie, you need to let this go. For your own good." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there in the quiet, feeling the weight of everything that had been uncovered. The suitcase. The letters. The betrayal. It was all coming together, and yet, nothing made sense. I knew one thing for sure now: I wasn't going to let this go. If I had to dig through every family secret, every hidden corner of our past, I would. Because I had no choice. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it, no matter what it took. It's funny how the truth always comes knocking when you least expect it. I had spent days piecing together the fragments of our family's past, and yet, with every new discovery, I felt further from the answers I was desperately seeking. But that phone call with Jean? That was the crack in the dam. Her words echoed in my mind. It was never about money, it was about trust. And betrayal. What had Frank done? What was the betrayal that had torn our family apart? I spent the next few days searching for anything I could find. I dug through the attic, where old boxes of memories were shoved into corners, neglected by time. The photo albums, the mementos, they all seemed so meaningless now. I couldn't stop thinking about the letters I'd found in that suitcase, the ones that connected Frank and Jean to something I couldn't quite grasp, and then I found it in a dusty old folder at the bottom of a box. Hidden beneath years of forgotten paperwork was a small, tattered envelope. It was thick, sealed with wax, the name Maggie McAllister written across it in Frank's familiar handwriting. My heart skipped a beat as I carefully pried it open, the years of neglect making the paper brittle under my fingers. Inside, there was a letter. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs, but every word sent a chill down my spine. It was from Frank, and it was addressed to me. Dear Maggie, I hope this letter finds you well. If you're reading this, then I fear things have already taken their course. There are things I've kept hidden from you, from everyone, and now, I'm afraid the truth is about to come to light. You've always been the heart of our family, the one who held us together, but there are things I've done, choices I made, that you won't understand. I did what I thought was best at the time. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I need you to know, Maggie, that this isn't just about me or about Jean. It's about the legacy we built together, and how easily that legacy can be destroyed. You have a right to know what happened. But you need to prepare yourself for what you'll find. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. The letter ended there, abruptly, as if Frank had been interrupted before he could finish. But those words, they hit me like a ton of bricks. What did he mean, choices I made? What was this legacy that was so easily destroyed? And why hadn't he told me this in person? Why did he leave this letter as if he knew everything would unravel the way it had? The betrayal was bigger than I thought. It wasn't just some hidden financial misdeed or an affair, it was something far more intricate. Something that had taken root in our family for years. Even before Jean came into the picture, I sat there for hours, staring at that letter, my mind racing. This wasn't just a matter of understanding Frank's mistakes, it was about the core of our family. The very foundation we had built everything on was crumbling, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. The next day, I drove to Jean's house. It was time. I couldn't do this alone anymore. I needed her to tell me everything. No more hiding. No more secrets. Jean opened the door slowly when I knocked. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. She had been waiting for me, I could tell. I didn't think you'd come, she said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. I didn't waste any time. I took a seat on the couch, the same one I had sat on so many years ago when our families would gather for Sunday dinners. The same place where we had laughed, shared stories, and believed that everything was as it should be. Jean, I found the letter, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I know the truth now. Frank knew. He knew everything. And he kept it from me, kept it from all of us. Jean's face fell. She looked away, but not before I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. Maggie, she whispered, it's worse than you think. I didn't just walk away from Frank because of the divorce. I had to leave to protect you. To protect everyone. My heart tightened. What did he do, Jean? What did he do to destroy everything? Jean took a deep breath, her hands trembling. It wasn't just one thing, Maggie. It was years of lies, years of manipulation. Frank, he wasn't the man you thought he was. He had connections. Dangerous ones. And he made promises to people that he never should have kept. Promises that came with a price. I couldn't stay knowing what I knew. I couldn't watch as he dug us all deeper into the mess he'd made. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. What do you mean, dangerous ones? What price? Jean swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. He made a deal with people who weren't just interested in money, Maggie. They wanted something far more valuable. They wanted control. And Frank sold us out, sold our future, just to protect himself. A wave of nausea hit me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a crushing blow to everything I had believed about my husband, about my family. The people I had trusted, the man I had loved, had all been playing a game with me as the pawn, but why? I whispered. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I couldn't, she said softly. I didn't know how to protect you. Frank made sure I couldn't say anything. But now you know. Now you have to decide what you're going to do with it. I sat back, stunned. The betrayal I had feared was real, and it ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just about a suitcase or a few lost photos. This was about the very foundation of our family, and the painful truth that it had all been built on lies. I spent the next few days in a fog, unable to focus on anything for longer than a moment. What Jean had said hit me like a hammer, shattering everything I thought I knew about my family. Frank had made a deal with dangerous people, people who didn't care about us, only about control. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces of a broken legacy, a family that had been sold out for protection. I couldn't understand how it had all happened. How could he have done this to us? To me? The truth weighed heavily on me, each revelation digging deeper than the last. The suitcase, the photos, the letters, they were no longer just family keepsakes. They were evidence of betrayal, proof of the lengths Frank had gone to hide his mistakes. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, calm, confident, always in control. But underneath it all, he was just another man with blood on his hands. And I couldn't let it go. Not now that I had to make a decision. I had to decide what to do with this knowledge, this truth that had been buried for so long. I didn't know where to turn. I couldn't just pretend it didn't matter. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I felt wasn't just grief, it was anger. Anger that Frank had hidden this from me, from all of us. Anger that he had thought he could protect us by keeping us in the dark. But in doing so, he had destroyed everything. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the old photo of Frank and me on our wedding day. We were young, so full of hope. I remember that day like it was yesterday, the promise we made to each other, to our family. But now, it all felt like a lie. Every happy moment, every shared smile, was tainted by the truth. I didn't know how to fix this, or if it could even be fixed. I knew I couldn't stay silent. I had to act. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about my children, my grandchildren. The legacy Frank had destroyed wasn't just his to ruin. It was mine too. And if I didn't do something, if I didn't find a way to set things right, then everything we had built would fall apart. I wasn't going to let that happen, but what could I do? Revenge had never been in my nature. I was a mother, a grandmother. I believed in forgiveness, in healing, not in vengeance. But the anger inside me was bubbling to the surface, threatening to explode. I could feel it in my chest, a burning desire for justice that I couldn't ignore. I decided to call Jean. She was the only one who knew the full story. The only one who could help me understand what Frank had done and why. I needed her to help me figure out where to go from here. Jean, I said when she answered the phone, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I need your help. I need you to tell me everything you know. I can't do this alone. I need to know how deep this goes. There was a long pause before Jean spoke. Maggie, I told you everything I know, she said, her voice tight. But if you're going after Frank, if you're going after this whole mess, you need to be ready. It's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be pretty. I'm ready, I said, the words coming out stronger than I expected. I don't care what it takes. I'm not going to let him get away with this. Jean was silent for a moment. Then we need to talk. You need to meet me. There's more you don't know. More Frank hid from both of us. I felt a chill run down my spine. What could be worse than what I already knew? What more could Jean have to say that could change everything again? Where? I asked, my heart racing. Where do you want to meet? I'll text you the address, she said. But Maggie, I need you to understand something. What we're about to do, there's no turning back from it. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long while, trying to calm the storm inside me. But I couldn't. I didn't know if I was doing the right thing, if revenge was the answer. But I also knew that without action, without confronting the truth head-on, I would never be able to find peace, and maybe that was what Frank had wanted all along, to keep us trapped in the past. To keep us so broken that we would never be able to heal. But he had underestimated me. He had underestimated the strength of this family. And now, it was time to fight back. The drive to meet Jean felt like the longest journey of my life. Every mile stretched out before me like a quiet, ominous warning, and yet, I couldn't stop myself. What had I gotten myself into? What was I really hoping to accomplish by confronting the past? A part of me wanted to believe that by facing it head-on, I could somehow right the wrongs of the past. But another part of me feared that it was already too late. As I pulled into the gravel driveway at the address Jean had given me, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The house was modest, an older home, but well kept, with flowers growing in neat rows along the front porch. It looked like something from a simpler time, and for a moment, I wondered how someone who had been part of my family's story could live here. In such quiet solitude, after everything that had happened, I took a deep breath, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I parked. There was no turning back now. Jean was already standing at the door when I stepped out of the car. She looked different, tired, worn down by years of secrets and silence. But there was something else in her eyes, something that told me she was carrying a burden she could no longer bear. She motioned for me to come inside, and I followed her into the house. The air inside was thick, heavy with unspoken words, with everything we hadn't said over the years. I sat down at the small kitchen table, the same kind I had sat at hundreds of times in my own house, and waited for Jean to speak. "I never wanted you to know all of this," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I kept quiet, things would somehow work themselves out. But now, I realize I was just as much a part of the lie as Frank." I felt a chill run through me, but I didn't interrupt. Jean needed to say it all. She needed to finally let go of whatever was holding her back. "Frank was involved with people who were dangerous, Maggie," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "And when he got in too deep, he started making promises. He promised them the things that mattered most to us, our family, our future. And he kept those promises, no matter the cost." I leaned forward, my hands shaking slightly. "What did he promise them? What did he give away?" Jean's eyes flickered with something darker, something that had been buried deep inside her for years. "He gave them information, about our finances, about our businesses, about everything we held dear. But that wasn't enough for them. They wanted more. They wanted control. And Frank." He agreed. A lump formed in my throat. This was worse than I could have ever imagined. Not only had Frank betrayed me, but he had sold out our entire family to people I didn't even know. "He promised them that they would have a stake in everything we owned," Jean said, her hands trembling. "He promised them that they could have a say in the businesses, the investments, everything we had worked for. And in exchange, he got their protection. He thought he could control the situation, but he was wrong. They took everything from us, and they left us with nothing." My breath caught in my throat as the full weight of Jean's words sank in. Frank hadn't just made a mistake. He had destroyed everything we had built. And he had done it for his own survival, without any consideration for the consequences. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" Jean wiped a tear from her cheek, her gaze steady on mine. "I couldn't, Maggie. I was afraid. If I told you, if I exposed what Frank had done, it would have torn our family apart. And I wasn't sure if I could live with that. I thought maybe we could go on pretending. But now, seeing everything you've uncovered, I know I made a mistake. I should have told you years ago." The silence between us was thick with regret, and I couldn't hold it back any longer. The anger, the grief, the betrayal, it all surged forward, flooding my chest like a tide. "Do you think I didn't notice?" I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. "Do you think I didn't see the cracks in our family? I've been living with this lie for so long, Jean. You're right. You should have told me. We could have fought back together." Jean looked away, guilt and sorrow etched across her face. "I know. I'm so sorry, Maggie. I don't know how to make this right." For a long time, neither of us said anything. I thought about Frank, about the man I had loved, the man who had promised to protect us, only to betray us when things got too tough. I had spent my life believing in him, trusting him, and now, I was left with nothing but the pieces of a shattered family. But the truth was out now. I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could fight for what was left. I could protect my children, my grandchildren, from the damage that had been caused. Finally, I stood up, my resolve hardening. "We can't undo the past, Jean. But we can stop it from destroying us. It's time to take action. We can't let them win. We have to make sure that Frank's mistakes don't cost us everything." Jean nodded slowly, a look of determination finally crossing her face. "You're right. We have to fight." And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe it was too late to fix everything, but it wasn't too late to fight back. The past might have broken us, But it wasn't going to define our future. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I first started digging into the past, but now that the truth had been revealed, there was no turning back. Jean and I met frequently, going through every scrap of evidence, every letter, every photograph, anything we could find that could help us piece together the full story of Frank's betrayal. We contacted lawyers, financial experts, anyone who could help us unravel the mess he'd created. The further we went, the more I realized how deep Frank's actions had cut. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was systemic. He had given them access to everything. Our homes, our businesses, our bank accounts. The silence between Jean and me began to shift from guilt to a shared determination. We had to stop the damage from continuing. We couldn't change what had been done, but we could make sure it didn't destroy the next generation. I had children and grandchildren who depended on the legacy Frank had built, and now, it was up to me to protect them. I remember sitting in Jean's living room one evening, papers spread out before us. We had just gotten off the phone with the lawyer, and I could feel the weight of everything bearing down on me. I looked over at Jean, who had been staring at the papers with a kind of blankness I hadn't seen in her before. The woman who had always been strong, who had left Frank to protect the family, now seemed like a shell of herself. "Do you think it's worth it?" Jean asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think we can fix this?" I didn't hesitate. "We have to try. For our children. For the ones who don't know what we've been through. They don't deserve to pay the price for Frank's mistakes." Jean nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The years of carrying this burden alone had taken its toll. But I wasn't about to give up. Not when the truth was finally out in the open. The next day, we called a family meeting. I knew it was time. It was time for my children and grandchildren to understand what had really happened. I couldn't protect them from the past anymore. But maybe, just maybe, I could help them understand how to move forward. John, my oldest, showed up first. He had always been the most distant of my children, and now, it seemed like his distance had only grown wider. He walked into the room, his brow furrowed, a mixture of confusion and concern on his face. Behind him came Mary, my middle child, and Jason, the youngest. They all sat down, their eyes on me, waiting for me to speak. "Mom, what's going on?" John asked, his voice laced with impatience. "Why did you want us all here?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on my chest. "There are things I need to tell you all. Things about your father. Things that have been hidden from this family for far too long." The room fell silent. I could feel the tension building as I looked from one face to the next. This wasn't just a conversation. This was the moment where everything changed. "I've spent the last few weeks going through the past," I continued, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "What I've uncovered about your father. It's not easy to say, but I owe it to you all to know the truth." I could see the shift in their faces, the confusion turning to realization, the questions starting to bubble to the surface. "Dad. What do you mean, Mom?" Jason asked, his voice barely audible. "I found letters," I said, my voice faltering. "Letters that revealed what your father was really doing, what he promised to protect us from. He made deals with people who weren't just after money. They wanted control over our lives, over everything we built. And your father agreed to give it to them." I could see the disbelief on their faces as they tried to process the words coming out of my mouth. "But why, Mom?" Mary whispered. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I didn't know how to explain it. How could I explain that the man they had known as their father, the man they had looked up to, had done something so vile? I had to hold it together for their sake, even though every word felt like it was tearing me apart. "I was trying to protect you," I said quietly. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to tell you that your father had made a deal with the devil. But the truth is, he didn't just make a mistake. He betrayed this family. And now, it's up to us to fix it." I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked at my children. I saw the shock in their eyes, the pain of hearing the truth for the first time. But I also saw something else. Something I hadn't expected: resolve. They weren't just devastated by the revelation, they were angry. And they were ready to take action. "We're not going to let this ruin us," John said, his voice firm. "We'll fight for what's ours. We'll make sure what Dad did doesn't cost us everything." I nodded, a sense of relief flooding through me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. My family was with me. And together, we were going to face the consequences of Frank's choices. We were going to take control of our future, no matter how difficult the journey. As the meeting ended, I could feel a weight lifting off my shoulders. The truth had been exposed, and while the road ahead wouldn't be easy, at least now, we could walk it together. The legacy Frank had tried to destroy wasn't just his to ruin. It was ours to rebuild. In the days that followed, the pace of our lives shifted dramatically. What had once been a quiet family existence was now filled with meetings, phone calls, and late nights spent going over the legalities of reclaiming what had been taken from us. But amidst the chaos, I began to feel a sense of peace, a quiet resolve that we were finally taking control of our destiny, even if it was one painful step at a time. The work was hard, but it was necessary. We had spent so long in the shadow of Frank's betrayal, but now, for the first time, we were working toward something greater than just getting even. We were working toward healing. Toward rebuilding. The first step was the hardest. We sat down with a financial consultant who began to unravel the mess Frank had left behind. With each discovery, the truth felt less like a burden and more like the key to moving forward. Slowly but surely, we started to regain what had been lost. There were settlements, negotiations, and the painful process of letting go of the past. But with each victory, no matter how small, I felt the weight of our family's history lifting from my shoulders. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I questioned everything. I would look at my children and grandchildren, and I would wonder how we had gotten here, how the man I had loved and trusted could have done this to us. But in those moments, I reminded myself of the lesson I had learned through it all: family is stronger than betrayal. Our bond, the love we had for one another, was the one thing Frank could never take from us. It was ours to protect, ours to nurture. The road to healing was long, and I knew there would be days when it would feel like we hadn't made any progress at all. But those days were fewer now. Each time we came together, as a family, to face another challenge, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had been tested, yes. But we hadn't broken. As I sat in the living room one evening, the sun setting over the lake, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The battle wasn't over, there was still work to be done, still healing to be had. But we were no longer fighting in the dark. We had the truth now. And that truth would guide us forward. I looked out at the water, the way it shimmered in the fading light, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The past no longer had a hold on me. It didn't define who I was or who my family would become. What Frank had done, that was his legacy. But the future? That was ours, and as I sat there, with my family surrounding me, I realized that the real lesson I had learned wasn't about revenge or justice, it was about the strength of forgiveness. Not for Frank, but for myself, and for the people I loved. We couldn't change the past, but we could shape our future. I hope you take away something from this story, something that helps you in your own life. Sometimes, the hardest thing is confronting the truth, but when you do, you can finally begin to heal. And remember, no matter how dark things seem, the love of family, the strength of the people around you, can light the way. Before I end, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. Your support means the world.